this big influx of Russian goalies and stuff, because there's been a focus over there of athlete first and technical second, and I think that's where they talk about. There's a few things. Why is Canadian goaltending fallen behind? I think one of it is it's become such a competitive market with goalie coaches in the different cities that everybody's trying to come up with their own thing instead of just coming up with a plan like the other countries have done. And then I think the system is a little bit broken for our CHL goalies, and now that's probably going to change.
Bingo.
You're forced. I get to ask this question, and I'm just going to throw my 2 cents on it. Is a CHL goalie, you're coming out coming out of your entry level contract at 21, 22 years old. Well, you get the players that come over from Europe or through college, they're coming out of their entry level at 24, 25. Mm-hmm. And there's some outliers. Mm-hmm. But now when you look at a goalie at 25 and you got to make a decision on that second contract versus a goalie at 21, 22, it's a big difference. Mm-hmm. If we can get those Canadian goalies another 3-4 years mm-hmm. playing with men,
yep.
because that's what's happening in Europe. They're playing with men already. Mm-hmm. And the whole dynamic of college hockey has changed, where the age group has increased, where the young players, your stars are still going to come out when they're going to go to college right away out of high school. But now you've got 1 to 3 bridge years where they're playing BC Junior and the Junior A leagues to keep their eligibility, and they're now pulling them out at 19, 20 instead of 17, 18. Mm-hmm. So now all of a sudden these goalies are coming out of their entry level at 24, 25. That's a big difference. Yep. And they're playing against men because the competitive schools have all the young superstars. But all of a sudden now all these other schools are just bringing in an older player. Like some of the teams in the Final Four have 24, 25-year-old players mm-hmm. because it's a way for them to be competitive against the top money schools. Yep. So that's where my thing is. This might be good for our Canadian goalies that you're not having to decide on them at 21, 22. Now mm-hmm. it's 23, 24. Put them on a more even playing field, and we'll see if that balances it out a little bit.
So would you open up the eligibility to like 22, 23 for the CHL?
Not for the you can't. It's going to end at 20, but it's now not. They're going to have, like, it's already happening. Guys have college deals already coming out of the CHL for next year.
Yep.
So it's already happening. But my thing is, if this didn't happen, if there was a way to change the CBA for those goalies so that they weren't coming out of their entry level so young. Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't going to happen because of the whole legality of it.
Well, I think who's going to suffer the most is the CIS, Canadian University, who has had amazing hockey players come through after their Western Hockey League or CHL careers, having not being able to go to the NCAA, would go get a free education as they were promised, and now that's going to go possibly by the wayside. I think the whole landscape of North American hockey.
It's going to change completely, because I was just reading an article today on the plane. USHL, there's teams that are wanting to leave the USHL and look at going into the Ontario League.
Well, say the same thing in the BCJ.
That's already happened. Yeah.
No, Logan Thompson too. He's a CIS goalie. Played 2 years, I think, at Lakehead. Yeah, and now one of the best. Yeah, still in the job in Washington.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Wild Wild West, man.
Here it comes. So that's the thing that it's going to get real interesting, the whole dynamic of what's going to happen, and now all of a sudden some of those late bloomers are maybe going to get a chance. It's going to be tough both ways.
Yep.
Anyway, somebody's going to get burned in the long run with this until they settle it out. But
well, we've seen it go both ways. We've seen guys that had all the promise in the world join the league at 18 and then be a bust, and then other guys who don't develop, like you said, till they're 25. And if you could just have a little more patience and have a place to put them, they could be an absolute diamond in the rough.
Yeah, but you're going to have a few of these junior A goalies that have been waiting on their scholarship, and all of a sudden you've got a 21-year-old coming out of the CHL that's played some real good hockey that's going to take their job before they even get a chance. Mm-hmm. So it's going to take a little bit for it to kind of get to where it's figured out.
Does that make your job easier or harder?
It doesn't change my job. What it might give us as organizations, and that's where the CBA is going to have to make adjustments on that. Rather than having to make it a decision on the goalie coming out of CHL, you might get a couple more years with him going to university. But I don't know enough about the CBA. I'm just learning a lot of that stuff now. They might have to make an alteration in that to allow those guys the flexibility, because you have their rights till they're like 25 or whatever the heck it is now.
I think we're only a decade away from seeing what they do over in England when it comes to footy players, where you can sign a kid as young as 12 years old and put him in your developmental league.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so no more draft.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, how the whole dynamic of these rule changes affect everybody, really, right from Canadians to the U.S. to Europe, because the USHL was a little bit of a hockey hotbed for a lot of these European goalies that couldn't find a spot over in Europe, and they come over and play. And so who knows? But I think the bottom line for me in my job and a job as a goalie coach, you get who you get, and you go from there. So it's not going to change it. Just the rules will change on how much longer a timetable of when we have to make a decision on them.
And like you mentioned, the NCAA was always those late bloomer junior guys that just weren't quite good enough to make the Western League. But here's that extra development. Like you said, 25, they're going to be way better at 20. And now those guys might get a little bit buried by the Western Leaguers or OHLers coming over and taking their
who knows?
But cat and mouse, right? Someone's got to win, someone's got to lose.
Yeah, but now some of these jobs that the scholarship guys lose, they can slip into the CHL jobs because it can go both ways now.
Right. Yeah.
Got to look at it that way.
Mind if I start unloading some goalie questions? I got a lot.
Go for it.
Hey, more hockey content. It might be old, it might be new, it might be a full episode, it might be a half episode, but you can click these boxes because who doesn't like clicking boxes?